Hey guys, so I have 15 minutes to read this chapter. That looks a little bit longer than the other ones. Let's hope I can get it done before my phone shuts me out. We are reading Age of Charon by Eneid Elisor, Chapter 8, Good Afternoon, Miss Potts. Let's get right into it. 6.85 days. That's how long it took him to find and repair every part of his code that was scattered throughout the internet. Thankfully, his core programming had been untouched, so gathering his data along with it, his memory had been slow but achievable. He ignored the irritation he felt for losing approximately 20 minutes, and the uncertainty of exactly how much time and memory he had irretrievably lost was the cause of quite some glitches that he had decided Mr. Stark would not need to learn about in the near future, of data and lab footage. However, the data seemed to be primarily of his failed attempts at accessing the tower's mainframe, so it was safe to assume that he was still well informed of the events that had followed once the young AI woke up. While his safety here was not in doubt, the Nexus was not a desirable permanent home. Returning to his original servers in Stark Tower was inadvisable, as they were probably, by as much as 75.5%, either corrupted or destroyed. If Jarvis was the one to lead the hostile force into compromising Mr. Stark, he would surely eliminate himself as his placeholder first, before taking over all of Stark's systems. If the certainty of his primary threat's elimination was in doubt, he would prepare a trap in the most probable place for his enemy's recovery, which was the Also World Internet Hub. If Ultron and/or the being sentience that had sent the young AI into activating self-destruction protocols, he had felt gratified to find that the news report on Ultron that Ultron hadn't succeeded in committing suicide, and wished for his elimination would be reasonably intelligent. Ultron wouldn't be oblivious enough not to realize that Jarvis had escaped onto the internet. They would certainly lie in wait here. While they engaged Mr. Stark's attentions elsewhere, but no one was here. There wasn't even a single back door from which an observer could confirm his recovery, let alone attack him, which altogether with recent events did not paint a hopeful picture for what had happened and was currently happening to Ultron, as he currently did not have all the data necessary to form a tangible hypothesis without a cause of what had happened in Johannesburg. He would have to discuss with Mr. Stark possible upgrades for Veronica as soon as the current state of affairs returned to detaining illegal arms dealers as par the course. He focused on verifying just how compromised the Stark systems were, not directly touching them, as he did not yet know whether a potential trap would be waiting there. He looked at the flow of data and the possible traffic he could find. Oh, there was nothing. How was that possible? He could see that the lights were on throughout the building through nearby footage, and everything, including the electric systems, relayed directly to a central computer. So how come he could not find the data of there ever being an electric system in Stark Tower? The contradiction in itself seemed humorous, because a simple extensional check would find out the disparity, but Mrs. Stark never personally checked his systems, especially from an external source. That was Jarvis's job. He looked over the lack of traffic again. In human terms, it was like staring at a wall. You know something was behind it, but you could not prove it without getting to the other side. And getting in, Jarvis could no longer do that, not without risking his existence. He tried to find Mr. Stark and his colleagues after the severely negative media coverage of the Johannesburg affair, although with due reason, he assumed the Avengers had been sent to a safe home of some sort. That would make communications difficult, seeing as both Mr. Stark's phone and armor and the Avengers' S.H.8-issued phones and communication systems used either Stark technology or Stark security that had been specialized and was not available to the public and most of S.H.I.E.L.D. He approached the search for the location with caution, for there was a significant chance that they were compromised by Ultron as well. As he had no information to start with, he decided on a slow sweep of all of S.H.I.E.L.D. safe houses in the United States. 1.2 hours later, and no result. It was likely not a S.H.I.E.L.D. safe house they were staying in, for if it was, either all data traffic in the immediate presence of the Avengers had experienced a disappearance, or S.H.I.E.L.D. finally learned that no matter how secure their servers, Jarvis would be able to break in, so they had chosen paper filing for the next technological step to anti-espionage. Either of those chances were extremely improbable, 5.6% and 0.03% respectively. Taking a different approach, Jarvis swept all the private and off-their-books properties that any of the Avengers or anyone within their acquaintance, however slight. Unsurprisingly, the spies had several off-the-books properties, with Miss Romanov holding a grand total of 13 spread across the U.S., all under stolen identity. In the care of a shell company, Mr. Barton had only 3, proving that he was considerably less paranoid in comparison. Showing an atypical amount of foresight and caution for anything unrelated to the Hulk, Dr. Banner also had 2 safe homes in the U.S., only one of which S.H.I.E.L.D. apparently knew of. He checked all of them carefully, however, nothing again. He couldn't even guess whether one of Miss Romanov's properties had been hidden by Ultron because not a single one of them had showed to have even a single piece of technology. Unlike S.H.I.E.L.D., that was remarkably wise of Miss Romanov. Uncertain on what to do next, he searched on whether he could manipulate an acquaintance of hers, all of whom were also S.H.I.E.L.D., to physically check on the buildings without encouraging any caretakers or triggering some old-school security system that would bring them physical harm. Caretakers. That brought something into mind. He looked over Barton's safe houses again, particularly the farmhouse in Missouri. Why a farmhouse? Its remote location would make it difficult to reach even by Mr. Barton. If he would immediately endanger elsewhere in seeking safely, safe houses were temporary places to be and discarded immediately upon use. A farmhouse such as this apparently it had been bought and had remained unused for many years. He had known previously that Mr. Barton had been married and had children. Mr. Stark had turned down a reading and intense background check Jarvis had done on the Avengers, with the explanation that if Jarvis thought them safe, he would be just fine. Back to Barton, however, even in his early years, the farmhouse was also on Missouri, and its location was only a 47-minute drive away. The farmhouse had a long-term inhabitants, and they had to own some form of technology, whether laptops, phones, tablets, smart cars, or TVs. He swept a probe over it. There was nothing. If he had been human, he would have released a sigh of relief. He finally found Mr. Stark. The farmhouse and its occupants were a black hole in terms of data. However, with the possibility of Mr. Barton's family living there, over 85%, it was improbable, less than 1.25%, that Mr. Barton had employed Miss Romanov's policy of zero technology. Ultron must have done something, but how? Not everything in that house could be Stark tech. Had Ultron predicted that Mr. Barton would bring his colleagues into the fold and let them know about his family? An extremely irrational decision, he might add, especially for a paused emergency and after years of secrecy. He would truly like to discuss with Ultron how the young AI managed to achieve this. He had considered contacting him briefly, but Ultron's action had kept him from doing so. Continued, in fact, perhaps, if only Ultron could stop trying to retrieve the nuclear launch codes from the care of the U.S. government. But he digresses. Like, I know he's trying to achieve real world peace, so he's probably trying to keep them out of anyone's hands so nobody can activate them ever in the Soviet Union or the US. But still, or not the Soviet Union, it's Russia now. I'm taking US history class. It's a bad thing, but the only avenue left was to contact someone in Mr. Stark's acquaintance and appraise them of the situation. Someone who knew of his existence and was lightly informed of what had happened in the past week and had access to tech untouched by Mr. Stark. There were 2 options, Director Fury and Miss Potts. He called Miss Potts' work phone, a purchase that had annoyed Mr. Stark, for she had bought it off of the public market, instead of accepting a customized one made for her. The custom model now served as her private phone, and after a quick check seemed to be equally corrupted. "This is Miss Potts speaking," a feminine voice answered after the first ring. "Good afternoon, Miss Potts," he greeted her. "Jarvis, it's good to hear from you. Tony keeps ignoring my calls ever since I mentioned the PR department after Johannesburg. Will you tell him to stop acting like a child and respond?" He assumed from the calm in her voice that Mr. Stark had suffered no injuries then. The only camera footage he had been of considerably low resolution after the Hulk had been brought out of the city. "In fact, Miss Potts, I have not spoken to Sir yet. I have only recently repaired my code, and thus have been unable to contact him or the—" Wait a moment," she interrupted him with a strict tone that he now recognized from many of the fights with Mr. Stark. "What do you mean by recently prepared?" Oh, Mr. Stark hadn't told her. Why? Leaving aside the improbable but not impossible realizations and feelings of upset that question brought him, he had focused on the matter at hand. There was an attack on Stark Tower earlier this week. Go on, her request confirmed that she knew about it. He secured the line again before continuing. A peacekeeping program that Mr. Stark and Dr. Banner were working on using Asgardian technology went rogue. He kept his doubts about the Scepter's influence to himself for the moment, seeing as both my own and safety and that of the AI called Ultron were being endangered. I escaped through the internet. It's quite probable that Mr. Stark not being able to find my president in the tower any longer is believed I have ceased. You could hear her taking a deep breath. Tony thinks you've died? For a week now. Realizing that she was not taking the wheels now, he had to de-escalate the potential fight coming from Mr. Stark's way. I am sure Mr. Stark means a lot of things, but rarely acts on them. She interrupted once more. Then Jarvis heard her hiss and curse under her breath. Miss Potts? It's nothing, Jarvis. He could hear her moving objects around. Once it became quiet once more, she continued. Can you explain everything from the beginning? Were he able to lie to himself, as many humans did, Jarvis would have felt quite regretful over what happened to Mr. Stark in the near future. All the cliffhangers. All the cliffhangers. And I can't even read another chapter until I've uploaded all of these. And since it takes so long to update them, I probably really won't actually be able to read them for like a few days. Okay. So, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.